All right, and I see we're recording, and this is our first internship class meeting, and I see sunshiny faces of two people, and I am blessed that I have two people, and so I'm glad to see you. We were actually talking about three. We're going to maybe talk about that a little bit more at the end. But I didn't want to take time to do three until we make sure we had one and two. I have everyone's one with the exception of two people. So I really need those last two CAAP ones, but the CAAP ones have been really good. And I think you've laid it out well, you have good information, so task two should fall right into place. And I'm getting a little flurry of those coming in, so they're looking pretty good.
Dr. Tillman, if we gave you our CAAP 1, and then I'm trying to remember, if we revised anything, do we then need to submit our final to you, or?
No, I would say unless I said, revisit. I often say revisit. I don't often say it, but if I need to say it, what I usually say is revisit the rubric and other information and revise or re-edit or whatever and resubmit. If I say resubmit, I want it back. If not, it's, I feel that once you get the feedback, you will be able to do what needs to be done. So
I was just thinking as you said that, I know we turn in for final evaluation on the other Blackboard. I couldn't remember if we needed to turn it back into you.
No, not unless I say, give it to me. And I don't usually say that unless I feel like you really need to make sure this is right before you go on, because I don't want you to be going down the wrong path. Okay. So the concerns with task two, I think just looking at the process, you're using your teacher working conditions survey or the advanced ed in South Carolina. You have that in one, all documented and with recommendations. In two, you're going to resurvey the areas of concern, and those areas are the one or two or three in each of those 5 areas. And when we talked with Dr. Lamb, when he had his town hall, he said the questions, I think he said 10 to 25 questions. And that would be depending on how many low ones you had or, how the spread was. Each individual school is very different. So once you did the with the questions resurveyed, then you need to analyze through a comparison. So you've got the low questions from the teacher working conditions in one, you've got the resurvey, so you're looking at those and doing a comparison. And once you get that comparison, you can see, did things get better? Are they the same? Did something get worse? Okay, so those new questions that are low, they form the basis for coming up with the questions that you're going to address through the focus group or the individual interviews. I think I should have stressed more the focus group because that really is an easier way to do it. And I think when we professors talk, we say focus group or interviews, and sometimes we say interviews or focus group, and it's either one is appropriate, but sometimes a focus group is easier in that you don't have the time restriction, but it's harder in that you've got to collect all that data, and you can either video it and then go back and document what was said, because you've got to capture what was said. And so when you do a focus group, you've got to really be organized to get the data. So anyway, you have the focus group or your individual interviews, and once you get that information, then that is the raw data. And I think your syllabus says that you have to provide proof through the raw data. You have to show that you resurveyed, which means, probably in the appendices, you're going to have the resurvey, and you're also going to have to document the raw data from the interviews or the focus group. And a lot of people are doing it in what I consider probably the best way. You're doing an Excel sheet and you're just putting the question, and under that you're just putting comments. You don't have to know which teacher, because it's anonymous. It's just, here are the comments. That's the raw data. When it says raw data, it doesn't mean it has to be handwritten, or it's not that. It's just down and dirty. What did they say? Phrases, words. One got mad, wouldn't speak. I mean, whatever it is, you're collecting that qualitative data, and it really is sometimes hard to capture. So that's all you need to do with that. And the narrative, you have to have a narrative and the graphic of all of those steps. Okay, and that's the end. You don't have to do anything else there.
So if just because we're getting near the end, teachers have so much on them, I tried to kind of mainstream the stuff. And so I've got a survey where they re-answered the questions and then asked them in that same survey about, why do you think this is? Give me feedback, and got them to also give feedback on some of my possible ways of fixing it, what they think could be ways of fixing it. So I kind of had my survey in multiple parts. Is that and I can go back and ask people also, but
I think that is really, I would say that's okay. My concern is going to be that you've got to say that you gathered that data. When you say you have an interview, that means one thing. When you say you had a survey, that means something else. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that you might be able to have a short powwow with, even if you can't get all of the teachers that you surveyed, if you can do a focus group, few of those people, and have them help you iron that out, and then use the comments as your raw data for the focus group, in addition to what you get from the focus group. I think that would be quite acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah. The main thing is we want to make sure that we have given the final evaluator what they want, and that's a resurvey, analysis of the resurvey compared with the original, focus questions coming from those still low areas, and either through a focus group or individual interviews coming together to look at that and what's causing it. Because if you know what causes it, you can maybe fix it.
And in terms of, just to run this by you, in terms of setup, the rest of y'all, if you did something, I'd love to hear it. I just did, the way I've got it, that's not complete, but the way I've got it is I've got like the 5 areas, sections of in narrative form of the 5 areas about the resurvey and what came about with the new data, and then 5 new sections of the same 5 areas about the comparison.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
Some people did it together, and that's okay. If you did,
would it make sense over one way or another?
I don't think so. The main thing is the way you present it in your paper. You want the evaluator to see that you have followed that process and that it's an organized presentation that they can
follow through. So like my headings, like I've got empowerment, resurvey, and then discuss it. And then I've got empowerment comparison. Like I've got the headings set up. Okay.
Yeah.
Eleanor, I don't know if this helps or not, but I did mine by quantitative and qualitative. So I did all of my quantitative with the 5 areas. And then I did from that, from the quantitative, what still, or what showed up when I analyzed that as still a low area. And that became my focus group questions for the qualitative.
That's how I've set it up so far. I just didn't call it those fancy words.
Yeah. And you don't have to do that, but that's a good, that
was how I was working at Carrie too. Yeah. That made sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. So
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important, I think, that we meet and ask questions, because like she has hers organized a little differently than some people. That's fine, because when the evaluator reads it, they can still see those big pieces coming together, and they can see you didn't leave out anything. The big thing is you've got to do the process, because if you don't do the process, you're not going to have the raw data. And that's one of the things you have to show them, is the raw data of the resurvey and the raw data of the interview or the focus group. Okay. So, okay. Other questions? Ms. Hall, do you have a question?
I am on task 3 and I'm working. I was actually didn't realize we had class, and I was out. My son had my phone and he said, "Mom, you have class?" I was like, "Oh shoot!"
Bang bang.
I just ran out to get something to eat because we started EOG testing, so we did not have a planning whatsoever. So I was starving.
Yeah.
But I am working on task 3 right now. I was working on it and then I left and went and got something to eat. So it's still up on my screen.
So
but my question.
Let's hold on to that and make sure we don't have any other concerns about task 2, because as I said before you got here, Ms. Hall, everyone, with the exception of 2 people, has feedback on CAAP 1 and CAAP 2. I'm getting a significant number of those beginning to come in. So for all the people who are not here, I want to answer any questions that they might have, but I think all the people who are here have submitted 2, or they're close to 2. Yeah. So any other questions about 2 for the good of the group? Okay, before we go to 3, I want to talk about my favorite thing, competency folios. All submissions need to be done up to date for the APSL, the APTL, the OMA, the SKIP, and any open-ended ones that you can do. Now, I had one person that called me about open-ended, and they were that was a person that had not been with us at the beginning, and they didn't understand about the open-ended, and so they weren't sure what to do about open-ended. So I want to say an open-ended submission can be from any of the tasks. So I would say if you have open-ended spots, you can go back and say, okay, conflict resolution. What did I do back there that I haven't already recorded in the ones that are required that had to do with helping teachers move forward with an issue? Or, what is it that you can say that you worked with conflict resolution? I think actually some of your group discussions, your cases, might have done some work with conflict resolution. That would be perfect to discuss as one of your open-ended conflict management submissions. But I'm just really encouraging you to please get those done, because you can go back and you've just got 2 things left. So let's get all the open-ended done from the things you've done before, so that when you get to the end, as soon as you finish the CAAP, I'm going to start pushing for you to get those CAAP ones done, so that you only have the school improvement ones to do at the end. Okay. Yes, Ms. Hall.
So with conflict resolution, I was thinking, because I handle like the bus discipline for 6th and 8th grade. Like I have a thick notebook of all the referrals I've done. Can I use that in dealing with parents and trying to help them as conflict resolution, even though it's...
You can, and what you would provide us, the evidence would be a redacted discipline form or a redacted email or something that shows that you're the person who handled it.
Okay.
This is what you handled.
See, I was thinking like with one, because I can't request the bus video. So when there was an incident where the parent felt like the child was being picked on, the principal had to request the bus video, and it didn't come through me. She actually emailed to request the bus video, which I never did receive. But I don't have, all I have is the actual referral, and then our conversation was verbal on the phone. So I don't have, but I have other referrals that, I mean, I could always copy.
So use another one.
Okay.
Use something that is, but if you're working with discipline, you have lots of different situations. I would say dealing with a parent. Some of you deal with distraught parents. Conflict resolution in that case is very important because you are de-escalating a problem that can end up on TV or someplace in the newspaper. And you just really want to practice doing that. So every time, it makes you really antsy and your stomach sort of rolls when it happens and you want to run away. But you need to practice that, because the more times you get into those tight situations and you figure out what to do and you learn to say, I'm going to have to think about this a little bit before I make a decision, and I'll be back with you in 24 hours. Sometimes, we want to just have the answer right then. And sometimes it's better not to have the answer right then, because you need to be thinking about it. You need to de-escalate. They need to de-escalate. Meanwhile, you can call the assistant superintendent who's over whatever the problem is and try to get some counsel. Saying I need help is one of the best things you need to learn how to do. And I will say that those of you who are in this class, I have 28 people who are very competent, who make good decisions. And it's harder for those of you in that case to ask for help than some others. You just need to know when you're getting on shaky ground and when to back up and ask for help. And so you need to practice ways of backing up without having the parent feel you don't know what you're doing. And you're not asking for help because you don't know what you're doing. You just don't know the best way to solve the problem. So conflict resolution is really important. And these competencies are really important. Because they're not part of your grade, so to speak, I think they sort of take back seat. But when you get into the job, you're going to be thinking about these competencies, because this is what's going to make you successful, that you know how to deal with these competencies, and that you're competent in these areas and you've sought experience in these areas. Seek the hard stuff. Ask to do the hard stuff, because that way you get experience and you'll make better decisions when you're on the front line. So anyway, those competencies, try to get all the open-ended ones done that you can possibly do. And as soon as you finish the CAAP, do all the ones related to the CAAP, so that when you get on to the end, you will just be able to zip right through and get it done. Okay. Now, digital competencies. All along, I've been trying to get people to do a variety of digital competencies. And these have been, the recommendations specifically are on every task description page in your manual. But there's a long laundry list of stuff. And if you think about this, in fact, I made a list, and I think I'm just going to read the list, because as I read the list, I want you to think about where in your program did you do these things. And if you don't have one of these things as an example somewhere in your portfolio, you really need to. Okay. I put down survey data. Well, how many times did you use survey data? Of course, you use that a lot, so that shouldn't be a problem. State testing data analysis. Think about the places where you analyze data and you put that out there as an example of something that you did that you were pleased with. Predetermined interview questions focusing on areas of concern. That would be just like you've done in task 1, when you use that in task 2, where you resurveyed the questions and you made up some interview questions. When you had focus groups with parents, when you did that, you had questions that you wanted to ask and make sure you got answers to.
But that wouldn't be a digital competency, would it? But that wouldn't be a digital competency, would it?
Well, it could be the list. It could be the list of the interview questions that you came up with. That would just be a list.
But that would fit for digital?
That would, well, it is a list, isn't it? Yeah, it's digital.
Okay.
So, okay.
I just wasn't thinking about digital that way. No, okay. I got you.
So as long as we type them, then that would be
the ones that you created. Yeah.
Okay.
The ones that you would have created. Yeah.
Okay.
Videos of interviews. You had some videos that you did when you talked with different people. Those are nice. Interview notes, Excel documents where you recorded things or analyzed things. Websites that you visited, especially, there were some really good ones that I saw back when we were talking about student learning and different strategies that you were looking at to improve instruction. Those were really good. Some of those were great. In fact, some of those I went out and looked at and shared with some other people because they were so good. Charts or tables or graphs showing data that was relevant to whatever the competency is. There were a lot of agendas and meetings and notes and all of that kind of stuff. That's sort of a mundane one, but it's quite fine to have it, just not all of them, PowerPoint presentations or Prezi presentations, those are good. Your action plans. I was surprised at how few of you actually used each of the growth or action or marketing plans as an example, because that was really pulling a lot of stuff together with a lot of information about what you know, because you included in some of those action plans all these websites and all these strategies and, so tables. Yeah.
I think part of my concern in looking at an action plan out of the several that we've done is where it fits in the list of competencies. Because you know what I'm saying? When you're looking at sensitivity or personal ethics or conflict management, or those don't seem to fit to me in those categories.
Okay.
I know that we did an action plan for APTEL, we did an action plan for, but I didn't see where that action plan fit in the list of competencies.
How about instructional technology? because
But I'm not instructing any, like it's not part of the instruction or the curriculum.
well, but it's a table, and it shows you know how to use the instructional technology. It's the use of the technology that is key.
And also in the marketing plans where we had to include the special programs, you're being sensitive to those needs of those students.
Okay, so see, it depends on how you see it. When you're talking about the student learning, you know, you can pull that in. You're meeting the customer needs. Isn't that customer focus? So actually, all of them could be customer focused because your parents are your customers. So if you're talking about the communication with parents, you know, that's, so you just have to sort of look at the competency. But those were really great examples of your work and your organization. So, you know, I would have liked to have seen those out there.
Yeah, I didn't even know to do that or think to do that. And I feel like we were, and maybe I'm wrong, and Eleanor, you're in my group, maybe you remember, I feel like we weren't supposed to put, because our paper is uploaded and that's one of our, you know, our APSL and APTEL and CAAP and all of that. So it wasn't supposed to be necessarily from our paper, or did I misunderstand?
It wasn't supposed to be the paper, just uploading the paper or even a task from the paper, but to upload a piece from the paper to show that particular competency. And
okay.
The marketing plan, not to do the whole task of the marketing plan, but just to cut the marketing plan and show that you were able to construct this. And some of those tables are pretty complicated. You've demonstrated that you know how to do a table and you know how to make it look professional. And you can, you know, here's where the goal is, and here's the stuff about that goal, and here's the next, and here's how I split this column. And, you know, there's some, if you did a good one, you've learned how to do tables. And
that's good to know, because I didn't understand it that way. So you will be seeing some of that in my portfolio now.
Well, it's in the portfolio. That's why it's so wonderful to have, because you have all these examples of what you can do. And I really, it's not a bunch of mess. If you go through that portfolio before you go into an interview and you look at those 21 competencies and what you've done to demonstrate your competence, that's going to give you something to talk about. It's also going to build your confidence. You have done this work. You know how to run a school. You know how to lead people. And that's for me, you know, beat me up as you will, but that's my goal, is for you to get out there and, not having been through the course, but having been through the content and you've brought it into your being. It's part of you. When you make decisions, they're being made from the real situations that you dealt with. And you can't beat that with a big stick. That's what you need right there.
Tillman, when you said that, that just made me think of something. And when we're talking about conflict resolution, can we say that the fact that we had to figure out how to organize the data in charts and tables, you know, how to best organize it to present it, could that be like conflict resolution kind of, you know, the conflict was figuring out how to organize tables and charts
with people.
Oh, people. Okay. People. All right. Okay.
These competencies really are about, in most cases, leading people to change. That's why we do plans, and that's why we make them specific, because you have a better chance of getting people to follow if they've got a plan to follow.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we've had lots of photos. In fact, more photos than I would have liked, but I was told photos were okay. But you know, when I see a photo and it doesn't say anything about where the photo is or what was happening or even who's in the photo, it makes it hard to see how it demonstrates that. It did demonstrate it. It might be a picture of you presenting to your group or to leading a focus group or presenting to your principal, but sometimes it just looks like a group of people standing around at a party. So it's, sort of hard on that, but some photos can be good. Zoom.
I'm on the opposite end of Carrie. I use my growth action plan. I think I use it too much.
Oh, well, Zoom sessions with your peers, doing peer reviews. That's a good one. If you haven't used that, that's a really good one because it shows that you know how to use Zoom. And I can't remember who it was, but there's somebody in this group that got accolades from their principal because they knew how to Zoom, and they interviewed some Spanish teacher in, I think, Colombia.
That was me.
That was you.
Yeah, I showed her how to do it. So now when we, because we have a dual immersion program, so now we Zoom with them, and that's how we have interviews.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's really neat. So
you can do that. You're the person that's going to be hiring people or interviewing people, and you've got people. We used to just have to do the people in the surrounding counties. Now we can say, look, this is a person that sent us a great resume. They're in Washington State, but they're moving to our area next year. Okay, let's interview them. Give them a call. Say, we Zoom. How about you? And they go, oh, they're with technology. I want to go to that system. They're on the move. Okay, so it not only gives you the skill, it gives an impression of you. It gives an impression of your school. And anytime we can do a positive to the community is so good because we take so many hits that we need to hit back with good stuff. And so a Zoom session can be that. Okay, you could even carry that into the classroom and Zoom with the mayor or Zoom with the city council or Zoom with the police chief. Just think about all the things you could do with Zoom in your classroom by interviewing people that don't have time to come to your school, but they might have time to Zoom with you for 10 minutes, Anyway, a Zoom session would be good. Your annotated bibliography. Some of you did include that, but that's a good one in any of those topics, but you have a really good one. What was it? It was in the teacher empowerment one. That would be great to put in. Observation checklist, the checklist that you created. That would have been a good one. Any kind of EVAS data or EVAS reports that you were dealing with. Hyperlinks to resources. Those would be possible goods. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of make a list there to encourage you as you go back to do those open-ended ones. Now that you have made some gains, hopefully, in your technology, you'll maybe try to include something a little different than just an email or, an agenda or power. Those things are good, but we want to show them what we got. We want to show them that what we know how to do. And a lot of it is just to take it with you so that you remember all this hard work you did and you remember that you do have what it takes to do this job. Okay.
Dr. Tillman, could we do if we use the Survey Monkey to either, I don't know, the link to the Survey Monkey or maybe a screenshot of the survey itself and what the results, like it'll graph the results and things like that for what we use for our for this one, for the CAAP, we use the Survey Monkey.
Mm-hmm.
Would that?
I think any of that would be okay. And the survey, doesn't it have the logo? Does it have the logo somewhere on, doesn't it? Okay, just a snapshot of that showing that it's on SurveyMonkey. So that's another piece of software, another platform that you know how to use.
Okay.
That's what you're trying to put out there. Okay, I think I did send you a copy of the meeting schedule, and it was on the bottom of some stuff. You got that, right? The meeting schedule. It's a one-pager. It's got all the times that we're going to meet. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you, and I'll show you my copy, it's sort of marked up. And the reason that you see those arrows on there is I was confirming that we were talking about an issue the week before you have to turn it in. And that's the way I've always tried to do my schedule. And I can't do my schedule until I know for sure what your professor's schedules are. And so once that gets locked in, then I finish up my schedule and try to make sure that it's going to work, because it doesn't do any good for me to talk to you about it when it was due last week. So sometimes it seems like I'm being really pushy, but it's to get it done. For example, on June the 19th, I will say that I have down there, we're doing the CAAP 3 and 4. And the next Wednesday, we're doing 5 and 6. Well, the reason for that is you're going to have the week of July 4th where we're not going to meet. And right after that, well, during that week, you have to turn in 3 and 4, even though we're not meeting. So we need to have discussed 3 and 4 so that you can turn it in. And then as soon as you get back, 5 and 6 are due. So if we're going to discuss them, we have to do it before the break. So just to sort of make sure you understand, that's why the schedule is done as it is. I really try to do it thoughtfully so you can have as much talk about it time before you have to do it. So that schedule is there. Now the schedule is also on Blackboard. I had somebody who was really unhappy with me because I don't have enough stuff in Blackboard. And number one, all of the resources for your course are in your professor's class in 605, 601, 603, 605. All of the resource materials are there. The only reason I have a shell is to get your work officially logged so that anybody who wants to talk to us about accreditation can go and see that you really did do this work, because that's where the work is housed, is in Blackboard. So I go to Blackboard, I pick up the work, and often Blackboard is down for 12 or 24 hours while they're doing some updates. And I can't miss that much time. So what I often do is go on Blackboard and pull down into my doc every paper that's available, and then I do the papers. And if Blackboard goes down, that's okay. I can keep working on your papers because I have them in my doc. So what I did is on Blackboard, you will find over on the left side, I do have the schedule and your links for your meetings of both class meetings and our office hours. So I hope that's okay. And let's see, what else did I have down here I wanted us to do? I think that's all I have. Now, before we start on 3, what questions might come up about all that? Any questions? I want you to feel comfortable with what you're doing. Okay. I hadn't pulled a lot of stuff for 3, but I think we can talk through it. because I think several of you are ready. It has a long list, a laundry list of things that you've done before. So you've got to do the mission and vision and school leadership and what is it, teacher quality and parental involvement, conflict resolution, student achievement. I have all those listed here when I took my notes from Dr. Lamb's class. And you have to do some recommendations and specific activities. And I think the big question that Ms. Hall had before we started recording may be the question that everybody has, is do you have to have all 5? Do you organize by the 5 areas, or do you organize by what it is listed? And I would say, I've seen it done both ways, but I think the easiest way is as you take each of those areas, if you will try to infuse your recommendations from task 1 and 2 into those areas. For example, you've got your school leadership. Well, that's very close to the teacher working conditions area, and you've got some questions that you did in leadership and what were the weak areas, and make recommendations there. So does that make sense that you could do that?
Some of the feedback that you gave me, and I'm sorry. Is it?
I saw a question on your face.
Yes. You had given me feedback on 3, and I think that's what you're talking about now is what you had mentioned in your feedback as infusing. So I guess my question is, what is my question? Is it redundant to go back and basically repeat the recommendations that were made under, school leadership and
I wouldn't think it's not redundant. I would, you're going to do your narrative about school leadership, whatever you're saying, and you can do a paragraph that says something like, in trying to determine how to improve school leadership, we have explored, and you can talk about what you explored, and we have discovered that there are several areas, but we want to focus on, okay, and here's the one you want to focus on. And after discussion with the team and a group of teachers, we have determined that we could do whatever. And we are going to do whatever. And if you did that with each section to try to pull out some of what you learned, because as I was telling Ms. Hall, one of the hard things about any program, whether it's our program or any learning program, where you're doing, here's a course, here's a course, here's a course, here's the focus of this, here's the focus of this. And then with each of these evidences, here's a task, here's a task, here's a task, here's a task. What we really are trying to get you to see is we're taking this data, we're analyzing the data, we're seeing problems, we're trying to figure out what we can do about the problems. Let's look and see if this is still a problem. So we've resurveyed, we analyzed that and compared it and said, oh, look, this got better. Oh, this is even worse. Okay, so we analyze that and we come up with, okay, these are the current problems. Okay, let's see if we can talk to some of these teachers about what they think is causing this problem. And that's what you've done. And while you're talking to them, you may get some really good ideas. And so you're going to come back and you're going to design a plan. And the plan is going to be not a whole bunch of gunshots, none of that, but some really specific things, not a bunch, a few important specific things that you can do. And you're going to put them in that format where you're going to say, here's what we're going to do, and here's the goal, and here's what it's going to look like, and here's who's going to do it, and this is when they're going to do it, and this is who's going to be involved. And you just go right along that growth plan or marketing plan, or in this case, the cultural plan. That's, to me, that's the big picture. I tend to be a really big picture person because I want to see people to see, where are you going? You're not just going to the end of task 1 or the end of task 2. You're trying to improve the culture of your school, and you're trying to do it using data. Not I feel, I think, but here's what people say when they have an anonymous survey and they can tell it like it is. Here's what they think the problems are. Now, we might say, that's really not the problem. We can think that's not the problem. But if your teachers think that's the problem, then that's the problem that they need to be talking about to try to figure out what the real problem is. Because it's just like I was telling Ms. Hall, there's someone in this class, and I don't remember who it is, I'm sorry, but their principal was out on maternity leave. And here's what the teacher working conditions survey said while they were out. And then the survey was terrible. Meanwhile, the principal's back. And the resurvey was wonderful. It was like, oh my gosh, she's returned and things are much better now. And so you don't want to solve those problems over here with the teacher working conditions survey because those problems don't exist. You want to solve the real problems because people only have so much energy, and they're gonna just give you so much energy because they've got to have energy for home and some other things. So the energy we ask them to expend must be on things that make a difference. And your job is to help them see what the data say about what will make a difference. And then you just push until it changes. That's your job. So as you approach each of those areas, look back at those questions and those recommendations that you can infuse in, and however you choose to present them, whether you just present all the narrative stuff and then you come back and go, okay, here's what we're going to do with each of those areas, or, which makes, I think, more sense, to discuss the area and then make the recommendations, maybe with a subheading. Mm-hmm. The main thing, and I say this, I think, every time, I hope I say it every time, the main thing is that you learn to organize what you write into a timeline, where here's what we did first, and then here's what we did next, and then here's what we did next. And then also organize it so that if you've got 5 things to address, you address the first one, and however you formatted that, address each of the following 4 in the same format, so that your reader says, oh, I see what they're doing, I get it, rather than it's all over the place with some recommendations up here and then some recommendations at the end, and then there's no recommendations in the middle. Then they start really looking, trying to figure out, did they actually do the work? And you did. I don't have any doubt about that. When I say it doesn't look like you did the work, it's because it doesn't look like you did the work. I know you did the work. It's just trying to get it across. And it's amazing how many of you will say, oh, I see. And then it falls right into place. And hopefully that's what we try to do, is to help you see how you can do it. That's why templates are good, but templates are bad in a way because I think sometimes people cut a template and put it into the paper, and I'm not sure they actually read what the template said carefully. It's just that the template's there. So, there's good things and bad things about that. So questions that you have about 3.
So I want to hit you again.
Okay.
I organize my paper by the areas that are listed in the rubric under the accomplished. I did school vision and I did my narrative with that. I did the school vision and mission, talked about that, and then I made recommendations about that specifically. And then I did school leadership and I talked about that, and I pulled in the teacher working conditions survey, and then I made recommendations about that, and that was the format that I used for all of CAAP 3. But then your feedback had talked about in, I guess how you're saying, infusing 1 and 2, and I'm still not clear on what you want from that. Am I pulling something from what I've done in 1 and 2 that fit under these categories for 3, or only what makes sense to fit under these?
Well, it would probably be something related to one of those problem areas.
Okay.
But it wouldn't have to be all of them.
Okay.
In other words, if there are some schools that they just had to really look to find anything that was wrong. Everything was, maybe 92 and above. So their situation was, how can we maintain this? So their questions weren't, how can we make it better? That's not realistic. How can we maintain? So the things they infuse are going to be quite different from what some of you are going to have, because some of you, your schools are in the 50s and 60 range. So you're pulling out the 50s and 60s and saying the 70s and 80s are okay, because you can't work on everything at one time. So that's why we don't say you have to do everything below 80, because some of you never finish because you have so many things. So it has to be relative.
So would it be then, and I hope I'm not bugging people with all my questions, but
no, I think it's good, because then I feel for the people who aren't here, because they can't ask questions and they can't jump in if your question spurs another question. And I like questions. I'm not offended by questions.
Okay, well, good. So I'm thinking about the section on student achievement, and would infusing, let's say, teacher leadership, because there are instructional things and resource things that fall from the teacher working conditions underneath that I've made recommendations on, that would affect student achievement. So would that be a way to infuse that into CAAP 3? Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, I remember that you had a program that you had tried with the APSL, and then
yes,
it was successful and you want to go school-wide with it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I can see that tying in more than one place, maybe even, but of course you don't have to put it in more than one place. I'm just saying, depending on how you write the paper, that's a good one. It probably didn't come out of the data that you have from this. That's not where that came from, but I think that's quite acceptable to put in. You just don't want to pull out too much stuff from the past beyond, or you'll just get this big ball of string that
gotcha.
But
okay, that makes sense now. Now I'm starting to connect some dots. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Richardson, you've been really quiet over here. What can we answer any questions for you?
Actually, I have a great team, and they keep me in line. And what you explained a little bit a while ago about the infusion and putting things that I was taking notes, so that was really wonderful, and I got my aha moment. So I appreciate that, even though I only been on a short amount of time. But I think between you and my team, I think I should be okay. So I appreciate it.
Okay, good. I just want everyone to feel that they have their questions answered.
Well, and so that I can help my team later, I haven't hit my aha moment. Task 3 has me, I'm baffled for some reason. And I haven't finished task 2, and maybe that's why. But I know task 1, we looked at the weaknesses and we made recommendations. Task 2, I'm resurveying to see, and then I'm having conversations, interviews, focus group. Why are these things like this? Making comparisons. I'm not making new recommendations yet in task 2 though, correct? That's what task 3 is a part of?
I
The
think
new recommendations based on the new data and the new conversations?
yes, but I would say what you should feel at the end of task 2 is, yes, my task 1 recommendations are still valid. Or, oops, I think the recommendations from 1 are going to have to change.
But I'm not using task 2 to discuss that I need a new recommendation. Here's a new recommendation.
You're not going to put recommendations in 2, but you may have different recommendations in 3 than you had in 1 based on what you gained in 2.
So the purpose of 3, because when Dr. Lamb explained it, I'll be honest, I didn't get it. I had 1, 2, and 4, no problem. 3 didn't make any sense to me. So in task 3, I'm using all those different areas, which, I don't know, merging this together, I don't know, it's just not clicking at the moment. But I'm using these different areas in my school to then put in kind of the finalized recommendations based on what I've done in task 1 and task 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Because, okay, think about it. Let's review it one more time. Survey, teacher working conditions.
Like I totally get the part about the survey and then resurveying, focus group, new recommendations. Okay. I guess to me what's not jiving is talking about mission, vision, school leadership, parental involvement, and then trying to merge all this in with that. Like that's the part I'm not meshing. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Like I totally get talking about the 5 areas, new recommendations based on what I did in task 2. All that makes sense. But then we're like throwing all this extra mission, vision, school leadership.
That's exactly the way I feel about it. It's almost like you're starting a whole new paper.
It's weird.
Because it's different areas. That's what it felt like for me too, because then it was like I'm pulling data now from the teacher working conditions to talk about student achievement and different things. So I felt like I was starting almost a different paper.
Like, I guess that's the part, like, what am I supposed to be talking about in relation to mission, vision, school leadership, parental involvement?
Okay. Culture. Think about what the culture of your school, and the things that are listed there are the things that have the biggest impact on what your culture looks like.
So am I just talking about it from my perspective?
No, it's from the vision and mission of your school. What is it, and are there things, is the vision and mission being carried out, and is there anything from the teacher working conditions survey that would improve carrying out that mission and vision?
So not just looking at the 5 areas, going and looking at other aspects of the surveys relating to mission, vision?
Well,
or just looking at mission and vision, focused on those 5 things we've already been focused on.
That you pretty much the 5 things you focused on.
Okay.
The school leadership one, we talked about that a while ago.
Yeah, that made sense.
That's a direct.
Okay.
Teacher quality, that has a lot to do with the culture of your school. And I was surprised to find that there's one of the schools in this cohort that I declare, I think I remember seeing someplace that they had 80% of their teachers certified. That's amazing. That has an effect on the culture of your school. If you have so many people who are, well, if you have international, or you have business to, industry to teachers, you have troops to teachers, if you have a significant number of people that are coming lateral entry into your school that are not, highly certified as highly qualified, that has an effect on your school. So, there's some stuff there. Parental involvement. You've got a lot of stuff about parental involvement.
But I guess like the 5 areas we were looking at weren't connected to parental involvement. Like we did that before in the OMA.
Okay, so
you see what I'm saying? Like, so should we go into the survey and find new stuff relating to parental involvement to discuss and then connect somehow with the 5 we've been focusing on? Or
I wouldn't go there.
Okay. That was where my confusion was. Does that make sense?
Why I was saying a while ago, don't go too far back, because then you'll just have more and more that you need to add.
Okay.
Okay.
But that was why I was confused. Does that make sense? Just because I was having trouble merging the 2 together. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
So and then when you get to conflict resolution, how is conflict solved? And a lot of that is open communication with PLCs and, some of the stuff that you probably have in empowerment.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense.
A conflict, sometimes submerged conflict is more difficult to deal with than open hostility. When you have people that have problems, but they don't feel comfortable in expressing the problem, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And that's a hard conflict to resolve, so.
Possible, I don't want to go backwards, but with the parental involvement and support, but maybe pull that in with resources.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if that was kind of what my thoughts was, in thinking about how to support the school culture and utilizing maybe that and tying that in with the resources portion.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, I think it depends on the areas that you had too. Under the leadership, communication with teachers and communication with parents is really an important piece of what leadership, is.
Right.
That's sort of the vehicle of change. We have to be able to talk to people and bring people into our way of thinking and have them tell us their way of thinking so that we can maybe change ours.
I have a question. Does the recommendations have to be the result of a team decision, or because I thought I heard at one point it doesn't have to be a team?
No, I think it needs to come from your group, and most of those should arise from conversations with other people.
No, I'm just saying, like, I have the interview information recorded, but the recommendations, because we just started testing this week, most of the people that were on the CAAP team were kind of connected to testing in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
And so we were not able to kind of meet. So I'm basically making the recommendations. I mean, I kind of informally say something to them like in passing, but it's not like been a sit down meeting because testing just came up and they were like, we got no time for that, Ms. Hall.
Did everything, can you pass everything by them in an email, or have them?
I can try. I doubt they'll respond. I was lucky to get I did the survey for the resurvey like 2 weeks before it was even due. and I only got 12 responses. People replied. And so everybody got in test mode and reviewing, and they just like didn't want to respond. So I only ended up with 12 in the resurvey. But before the survey before that, I had 34 responses.
Yeah.
So it's just that testing came up, and everybody was like, and now everybody's like today was our first day, and I didn't finish testing until 1:15, and then I had no plan, and we get out at 3:00. So we were like all running out, like people were just running out. So I kind of making my recommendations based on the interview data.
Well, I think it's the way yes, I would word it like that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The recommendations were made based on the data collected.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Kelly, did you get to ask a question if you have a question?
Are you talking about me or Latia?
No, Ms. Kelly.
No, I'm actually driving right now. I didn't get your email saying that we had class tonight, so I got to get that fixed.
Yeah, I didn't either. No, Sheila told us.
She sent us the link. So I was out of town, and I'm actually driving right now, so I have not taken any notes. I'm hoping you're going to email this out so I can really watch it.
Well, I'm hoping. My little record button says that it's recording, so
it is.
Okay.
I have all intent. We have to depend on Google and YouTube, but other than that, it'll come out. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So I'll go back through and watch it. I've been listening, but I haven't been able to focus on it because I'm trying to drive. So yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, we'll shut it down. I don't want to keep you too long. You have other questions, anyone, for the good of the group?
Okay, I have another one, and I apologize. I'll get it, I promise. What if in one of those areas, parental involvement, the student, I don't have the list in front of me, so I only jotted down real quick the ones I could while you were calling them out. What if out of our 5 areas, there wasn't a weakness that we've been looking at that has anything to do with that area? How do we then discuss it and give a recommendation? Like if none of my weaknesses had anything to do with parental involvement,
okay,
would I make the connection like in a roundabout way because better parental involvement creates better student focus and work?
And that would probably be with either empowerment or leadership.
Or the more teachers, the more teachers are connected with parents, the better the teacher leadership. I mean, like,
the better learning.
If none of my weaknesses had anything to do with that area, do I then simply try to make the connection through how they would merge together or through how one would affect the other?
Okay, I think maybe we're trying to make this too hard. So
okay, and I typically do that, so please help me.
No. I'm just going to venture out and hope that I don't muddy the water by saying, I think you should use the data from the teacher working conditions survey, the resurvey, and the interviews and focus groups where possible. I would say if there is something that you feel needs to be done based on, let's say, your qualitative observations of your school, you can make that recommendation. How about that? And you might even have some data that you remember from something before that you might throw in as a little gem. But I think, remember, this is supposed to be qualitative data being recognized as being as important as quantitative. And as an observer in your school, you have a lot of data.
Okay.
I would say that you could do that.
So if we go outside of those weaknesses that we've been focusing on, as long as it's related to the culture and the overall connection, that would work. Okay.
The whole idea is for you to have recommendations that will improve the culture of your school. Because when you get to 4, you're going to do a growth plan for your culture. And so it's, you know, it's got to be about culture as a whole, which is a composite of those things that you're writing about. But as a participant observer in the school, that's your role as a participant observer. And you can even say that.
Okay.
As a participant observer, I feel, or I recommend, you know, and I'll take
Dr. Tillman, I think that helped a lot right there when you reminded us that we need to be pulling in and referencing the qualitative data that we've collected through the focus group, and that kind of is the blending in, because I think I've done a lot with the quantitative in CAAP 3, and I think maybe that's what you were trying to get me to understand, is the referencing the qualitative that I pulled in during CAAP 2, and then with the participant observer that I can make recommendations in those areas beyond the quantitative, the qualitative. So that's starting to make a little more sense to me. I can see now where CAAP 2, I was having trouble understanding how CAAP 2 was flowing into CAAP 3. And then when I look at it with the lens of qualitative, I can see how that then blends into CAAP 3.
Okay.
If that made any sense.
Yeah, because I'm sure when you talked with teachers, you can ask them to focus on a specific question, but I bet some of them unloaded a whole bunch of stuff about other stuff. Isn't that right? Okay. So as a participant observer, you have that. You have it in the raw data that you collected. Remember, you have the spreadsheet that has all that mess that that came out, and all their frustrations and all of their, some of them's hopes and goals, and, you know, so any of that is fair game to discuss and act on.
That's starting to make a lot more sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Me too. And how did you say that, Dr. Tillman? As a participant observer, I would recommend, is that how you said that?
Well, as a participant observer, yeah, you could say, based on, and whatever the reason is that you feel this recommendation needs to be made, as a participant observer, I am confident that we could improve by whatever, put it in your own words, but you know, making sure, because as a participant observer, you know more about your school than any Southern Association person walking through, or any, you know, Board of Education person walking through. You know the nitty gritty and the down and dirty. And we try to hide that from all those higher ups. We want them to see we're shining. But what you're trying to do is really figure out what to do to make it better. And that's why you ask the teachers. And that's why you should write down everything they say, because sometimes they say really good things. And sometimes principals want to hear that. You know, they really do want to hear that, so they can make it better. Okay. So hopefully when the papers come in, I won't have confused you totally. But I think you're really, as always, you're trying to do a super job, and you will, but don't get doing too many balls of string out there at the same time, you know, and just keep remembering that the whole idea right now is for you to gather all the information, make these recommendations, and then in 4, you're going to translate them into that same format. So as you're making the recommendations, be thinking about, is this possible? I mean, is this, we don't want to, you know, pie in the sky. We want really things that are going to be meaningful. We don't have time to do pie in the sky. We hardly have time to do. Okay, so I think that is the end of our discussion, I believe. If anybody needs to have more, just let me know. I really would prefer that you call me or email me, and let's work it out before you do the paper so you don't have to do it over. Rewrites are just, they're painful for me, and I know they're painful for you. Okay. Okay. Good night, everybody. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.